What if BG3 ended with killing Ketherick? What if the game ended with us looking triumphantly towards Baldur's Gate with Ketherick's netherstone in hand and planning to save the city, and then we would have gotten the end credit screen? Would the game be the same if we would have gotten in Baldur's Gate proper through a DLC? And what would that DLC look like? I know the last part of the game was rushed and there's no point in beating a dead horse, but this is just a fan daydreaming about what could have been. Today we're going to explore how fleshed out would Gortash and Orin be if given more time. And before we start, let me first address the elephant in the room. I know this would not actually be possible because of the backlash they would have gotten if in a game they called Baldur's Gate 3 there would be no way to access the city proper. So this is already a bad example on my part. But just for the sake of the discussion, bear with me as this is just an example that is meant to showcase possible cool encounters in the game. So, after we defeat Ketherick and find out the plan with the Absolute, we gather our resources and move towards Baldur's Gate. The DLC starts with us arriving in Baldur's Gate and we are met with the Steel Watchers. Two routes are possible. If we've been sneaky throughout the main game and the scrying guys have not seen us doing anything out of the ordinary, then we will be led automatically into Worm's Rest. We meet Gortash and we observe the coronation. After that, we realize that we cannot fight him as is because of all the Steel Watchers. He is much too strong. We must gather our allies. This is where a cool section of the game could be us trying to impress the different factions in the city in a much more detailed and fleshed out manner than the original way. Maybe we have to do a series of missions for Nine Fingers. Maybe we have to actually earn her trust instead of doing one mission and recover some lost money. After we recover the money, she could ask us to steal something for her again, but this time the target is that annoying NPC near Upper City Gates that sells gems.
Drab attire? Lackluster skin? My darling, you need my gems. They'll brighten even a ghoul like yourself.
A cool stealth mission where you need to pass multiple stealth checks and perception checks in order to get an important diamond without alerting the fists. Maybe if we betray Nine Fingers and ally ourselves with the Zentarim instead, we then have a full-on war. The Zenths could use their connections to provide us with devices that could neutralize the Steelwatch and then fight Gortash head-on. But right before we strike the final blow on Gortash, he escapes and retreats into the upper city where the Steelwatch is even stronger. A series of events involving politics and intrigue could start by having a mini game where we would do missions for people of the city and influence the perception they have on us, similar to how the printing house mission did. But instead of us just seeing some people on the street talk more politely to us, that trust would actually sap more power from Gortash that has a strong one on most patriarchs of the city. It would be akin to how wars and some events in Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor was, whereby destroying outposts by killing mercenary bands and freeing slaves from the Black Hand's grasp, we would be weakening Gortash's forces constantly. Everything would culminate in two big phases. Phase 1. Go to war with Gortash in an all-out war and basically have a minigame akin to Magic the Gathering or to Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous and have a grid match with different units in a multi-layered war against Gortash's generals. Phase 2 would be us finally taking on Gortash and his main guards in a final clash for the Netherstones. All of these details would be so that the game emphasizes how much control and planning Gortash truly had. So great was his power and so many were his resources that it took multiple phases to truly defeat him. Again, I'm drawing more parallels to the Middle-earth games, where through a map menu you could see how much of the territory is actually controlled by you and how much it is controlled by Gortash. The second route would be a series of missions that would require stealth and patience. Essentially, we would have to infiltrate the Temple of Baal by sniffing out and catching Dolor, taking his armor, and sending one of our companions in there to see how big the army of Baal truly is. This would be a separate sequence of the game where you only control one character and go in alone, Mission Impossible style. Once inside the temple, the lone companion would have to observe certain rituals to understand where the strength of these cultists resides. After a couple of incredibly descriptive scenes, the companion would start to falter and feel the pull of Baal into chaos and mayhem, hearing voices that ask him to betray his allies and murder everyone close to him. This is where, depending on our choices in the main game, we would have Halsin and the mote of the spirit of the land, Oliver, that would help us cleanse the corrupted mind of the companion in question. If we didn't help the spirit of the land in Act 2, then we could always talk to the nymph in the Circus of Last Days for help instead. After said the companion would be cleansed and regain control, we would finally know where the entrance to the temple is and we would go in and fight the cultists in their lair. It would be dangerous, but with the help of Halsin and Oliver, if we cleanse the Shadow Curse lands, or Jahera and the Nymph, if we did not, we would eventually succeed in striking at the base of the cult of Baal. We would then proceed to have a gauntlet style fight where each layer of the temple would be riddled with cultists and we would have to clear the temple of them. At the end of each layer, we could have one long rest, with the last layer being Orin and the last big fight. After we would defeat both Chosens of the Absolute, everything else would proceed as normal. We would either betray or ally with the Emperor, and we would fight the Elder Brain in one big final clash. I want to emphasize that the game is already very good in my opinion, by the way. In fact, it's one of my favorites. So this is not me hating on the game or anything, but instead it's just a big fan finding more reasons to talk about one of his favorite games ever. This video idea was basically me daydreaming about possible alternative ways the final act of BG3 could have been, and this was my attempt at giving it a bit more structure and provide more weight to the villains, since I think many of you felt a bit underwhelmed in some ways and overwhelmed in some other ways, and the feeling of being pulled in 10 different directions at the same time usually is not a good feeling in an RPG that heavily focuses on story aspects. But anyway, thank you for indulging me in what I just described a fanfic, and see you next time.